So quickly, that will share any welcoming remarks.
Thank you very much, Young Clark, and a very good morning and happy new year to members, officers, and those of you that are watching this recording online. This is the January meeting of the West Ham Park Committee at the 1st of 2026. I'm James St. John Davis, Chair of this committee. I would like to start with item 1, which is apologies. I've had apologies from John, who can't join us today. And I'm aware that we have several members joining us online for a variety of reasons. So, welcome. Hello, Caroline.
Good morning, everyone.
No, any other apologies? Yes. Thank you very much. We will note just apologies. Else? Let's get the worst, the bad news out of the way first. As many of you know, today is Andrew in his last meeting with us here at West Ham Park. He's trying to look forlorn, morose. Andrew, on behalf of us all, I want to extend our deepest thanks and every best wish for the road ahead. You have worked tirelessly, and if I may, personally, your ready humour and easy dots of perspective to me as a relatively fresh chair have been absolutely strength-giving and helpful. So thank you for getting up all of that. Thank you for the work you've done on the nursery side, education, so much of the battles and the difficulties we've had over the last few years. But I know I speak on behalf of us all to say that your dedication, commitment, and desire to find solutions has been wonderful and will be sorely missed. So on behalf of us all, I wish you the very, very best as you return to sort of pure conservation as the Chief Executive Officer of the Conservation Trust, which sounds absolutely delightful. But thank you. Thank you. On behalf of us all. Declarations under the Declaration of Interest on the Code of Conduct have the standing declarations of our new councillors and colleagues. So, do we need to go through the details, or can we note those?
Can't see if Councillor Lofthouse, are you online?
Yeah, no, there's no. She's over there.
Oh, sorry.
We have to get used to this there. Concentric circles.
Thank you. We will note your declaration for the nursery site item.
Yes.
Very good. That brings us to item 3, which is the annual review and approval of our terms of reference. We're being asked today to agree to the recommendations in the report. I think it is. Sorry, Brendan. Oh, very good point. No, that's all right. Zoe did send a note round on behalf of town clerks. We've had a look at the high-level summary of that meeting, but I think the reality is that the concertina that we have between the December meeting and January has just meant that there's been an enormous backlog. So those will come out to the committee as soon as they are ready. And I think I'm absolutely right, wanting to make sure those are done to the standard we normally expect. But what I can assure all of you is that there's nothing in there in terms of carry forward items that has been missed on the agenda for today. So thank you for flagging. No, not at all. We'll note that. Those will be circulated by email. And then we'll sorry, for noting, and then we'll approve them at the next meeting. Excellent.
Yes, just that one point. Obviously on page 7, we've got 3 listed vacancies, which I don't think are actually vacancies. The other part of the different in terms of reference, I think we don't often look at this enough because it makes really clear what our roles and responsibilities are. And it actually leads us to agenda planning quite nicely. You'll see that monitoring and reviewing the National Environment Board strategies is clearly listed there, and indeed to look at planification and other things. But we don't often see that called out explicitly on the agenda. Perhaps it might be worth just having a think about that as we move forward.
Yeah, thank you very much for that. I agree with that point. I think that's often something that comes to the fore with a specific issue or matter or action to discuss. But I think having it there as a reminder to sort of thread those conversations is well worth it. Jack, are we happy to take that away? as a point to consider. I mean, I think obviously these are going to see significant overhaul rather in the next 12 months. So I think any comments that we can feed into that, bring those points out and then council this to life, we'll gladly take forward. Catherine, did you have?
Yeah, it needs to be updated with the representative of West Ham Park and representatives of Glenborough View. So that this, as well as having the 3 vacancies, it needs to be updated.
Thank you, members. So to note, the terms of reference appended to this report are the ones that were adopted in court in 2025. So all the membership and vacancies will be updated for the next appointment.
Very good. Thank you. Any other thoughts, comments, contributions?
Can I
Yes,
make one?
thank you for giving in the.
I was just one thing about the quorum. It might be that I haven't quite understood, but quorum of only 5 members, is that from the Court of Common Council or across anybody who's in through?
Across the broad membership of the committee. So
So
not just the elected members of the corporation, any 5 members.
Right. So it's possible then that nobody from the Court of Common Council would be there and it would still be quorum. It would do 2 councillors and.
Well, I suppose to be, the chair or deputy chair would need to be in place.
Yes.
And obviously on behalf of the elected members, I would like to say it's practically impossible not to have any one of us at every meeting. But let's think about contingency.
Yes, that's one thing in the question.
Yes, indeed. Yeah. So we have had instances before where we've not been able to get sufficient. So chair, deputy chair just means we can't take decisions in the meeting, but the meeting proceeds to take discussion and information items. I'm sorry, Janie, but in serious, were you thinking about a particular contingency or situation there?
Well, I don't know what situation might arise, but
Right.
just if there were a meeting and everybody got held up or something, and
Yeah.
you only had 5 people who were not, as it were, the.
So any 5 minutes to proceed with the business, obviously would need to then have the chair or deputy chair
I was thinking back
to make decisions.
that's not what it says.
Yeah.
If there are 5 members in a room, even if none of them, they could elect someone to chair that meeting.
Okay, thanks for that clarification. So deputy chair, so strike the earlier position, Jane. In effect, go back to the core. It's any 5.
Yeah.
Of those 5, they would elect a acting chair for that meeting, and that chair would review and be able to take.
Yeah, can I possibly ask officers to go back and check? Is this a requirement of the? Are we under an act? Are we under an act of West Ham Bank? Okay, so is it the subject of, does the indenture specify what the forum is for this? Can we do it ourselves?
It will standing orders. So the indenture specifies the composition of the committee, but then it's sort of it is governed under standing orders in terms of the rules and regulations of actual commission meetings. So there's an interface there, but I would need to double check that just to be clear. I can do that.
Some of the other bodies that have a hybrid of corporation members and non-corporation members require there to be a certain number of corporation members to be present in order for it to be quorum. It would seem somewhat bizarre actually if this committee had a quorum that allowed the external members to be present and hold a meeting and to make decisions when there were no city corporation representative present.
But at this point, you're saying
That's exactly what.
Yeah, and that was my point.
that's very, very good.
Unless there's standing orders, otherwise.
No, they won't do.
Well,
The court order, which is what this is, has the same sort of legislative force as the standing orders. Yes, I think we might need delegation authority to revise that if we need to.
We're happy to give that.
There is a recommendation for what
It is. Thank you very much. Jane, thank you for reading that. Very important and some point. Any other questions, comments, contributions on item 3? If not, sorry.
Thanks, Chair. I just get clarity from the committee that they would like this considered and changed as part of this review and not the.
That was my view. We content, Town Clerk?
Yes. Yes, I agree very much. And I would say, I think some of the other committees only allow the chair to be held by the City of London Corporation representative. I think the deputy chair to be another committee.
On that point, that issue has been raised in this committee. And since that chair.
Again, yeah, unless it's in the indenture, which we will.
Everyone is content. We'll then move to item 4, which is the Assistant Director's report. Bill.
Good morning, Chairman.
Forgive me, Bill. Can everyone online hear us? It might just be this room, but it feels really. Oh yes, thank you, Caroline. It feels very odd. This tiny little microphone in the room.
Yeah, it's fine.
Like someone's going to come on and say, I can't. Has the meeting started yet? Thank you, Bill. Over to you.
Thank you, Chairman. The report is for information, but there are a few items I would like to call members' attention to, and then a brief PowerPoint slide to show some of the activities that are happening in the park. On paragraph 6, I wanted to just note that a full internal refurbishment of the toilets near the playground began in November. That is going well, and we are getting positive feedback from members of the public that those works are being undertaken. We expect this to end at the end of January, and we're working very closely with the City Surveyor's Department. But it is a most welcome investment in the park, and is reflective of the larger program of works that are happening through the recently increased cyclical work program. So a really good addition to the park, and it's great that these will be refurbished and ready to go before the warm weather and the high season in the park. I do want to just call attention to the great partnership we have with the Friends of West Ham Park. They continue to deliver events in the park free of charge for the local community. They recently did a food bank collection as part of another event that provided food to Newham Food Bank. They also hosted Park in the Dark in the 5th of December, which is an annual, very successful event, leading guided walks around the park with lanterns. And we had almost 300 people attend. So again, a fan favorite of the local community. We do have a number of events coming up later this year, which is outlined in paragraph 25. As I think members will recall, Eid is very popular in the park for the local community, and we expect that we will get another gathering this year, and the team will be ready for that. But again, we're just really grateful that members of the community view the park as a place where they can come and celebrate together as a community, and we're glad that that will be happening again in the park. And finally, just for an update and to call members' attention, you will know that we were working through some challenges earlier this year and taking some actions as a next step to ensure that we continue to make sure that West Ham Park is a safe and welcoming place for everybody, including officers. And as one of those actions, we have reviewed the CCTV provision in the park. And I'm happy to note that we have been able to identify sufficient funding to install new CCTV cameras at 3 new gates: Nursery Gate, Linden Gate, and South Gate, ensuring that there's at least 2 cameras on each pole, and ensuring that now all 7 access points in the park have active CCTV. This will be a really important increase in our security provision and making sure that the park remains safe. And we were able to identify a combination of funding from local risk through preventive actions that was funded through the insurance team, and some works from the cyclical work program from the City Surveyor's Department. So a team effort to make sure that we were able to take that action. We had a very positive meeting with the Metropolitan Police about 10 days ago as well, about strengthening our partnership in the park, asking them to increase their presence and to remain in active communication with us. And most importantly, to ensure that we're sharing data and that we're giving them information so they understand where activities are happening in the park, and we can also understand where activities are happening around the park that may involve our activities and our safety precautions in the park as well. So we've continued to take those next steps that we've discussed in prior meetings, and doing very much everything we can to ensure that when the warm weather months, longer days, and the high season and increased footfall comes, we've done everything we can to ensure that Westmere Park is a most welcoming place. I'd be happy to take any questions before the slideshow.
That's excellent. And those has pointed upwards, given the trajectory that we've had over the last few committee meetings. I think very welcome. I think also worth noting that together with Jane and John, as we met in the park at the beginning of this year, had a very helpful discussion with Bill and the team, and there's been some really positive follow-ups on that, both with the Borough Commander's team, City of London Police, and some onward actions for us to take in terms of some levers that with the Met Police, given their desire to highlight how safe London is, as to what options levers are available to us in the future. Should we not be able to enact some of the changes? And I think in short, the principal one is a lot of the local policing passing around the park as opposed to it being through. And I think one of the easy wins for us is having that patrol line put through. One of the questions I had, Bill, is do we have now a layout in terms of, I know we have a sort of line of sight and direction of travel. Do we have one on the CCTV front where we know what the blind spots are? I'm just thinking in terms of us then being able to overlay when we do, subject to us actually getting the same, we'll actually have, even if it's once a week, a direct police patrol. If we could then say to them, actually, it makes sense for you to take this route because that's the route that isn't covered by any form of CCTV. I just think that ability for us to look at our potential blind spots and address those probably a key part of planning for the months.
I'm confident that it's an action we will update when the new CCTV is installed, but I think it's a very good suggestion, Chair, that we will do that very clear in the layout, showing where the blind spots are, and we'll share that with both the Metropolitan Police, but also our partners in Newham. And thank you for the reminder. We're remiss in not noting the very productive conversation we had with Councillor from Newham Council and the conversations we're having with the community enforcement team as well at the council, who the team remain in contact with. So we will update that map and we'll ensure that that shares with our partners.
And in terms of our incident log and reporting that outside of the park to ensure that their data now doesn't have the park as a sort of light, the safest part of London. Is that something that how are we doing on that front in terms of being able to feed that into the data collection?
Thank you, Chair. Just to reiterate, in terms of the blind spots in the past, we have done a number of surveys and assessments to ensure that the additional poles at the 3 gates are going to be installed, and there will be additional cameras on the existing poles, and they will be upgraded. So we foresee that there will be now no blind spots within the park, and the whole park will be covered. We've also done an assessment of the scrub that may have been affecting sight lines. So they have been, trees have been lifted, so they have now been cleared out. They have and will be mapped, and that will be sent to Newham Council and the representative and the necessary stakeholders. In terms of, sorry, give me the next question. Was the data? In the data, yeah. So I following on from our meeting with Newham Councils. I've been in touch with Newham and also with the Metropolitan Police, and we have agreed to share our incident log. So there will be a sharing of data with the Met, and we have also asked that we are able to see their data as well. The park team have advised to report, they were advised at that particular meeting that Bill and I attended on the 16th of January, that we would report all incidents as well going forward to the police through a 999 call, and in cases of emergency and 101, even if they were considered by the park ranger team previously to not be reportable, he said to report it because it would build up a case, and therefore present the data to enable him to get perhaps more presence and patrols in the park.
That's absolutely brilliant. Thank you, Charlotte. And I'm really pleased that, I mean, we have no blind spots, and there is a real pattern and trend analysis feeding into that central data. I think both of those, I mean, that's a really strong left and right hook. Brilliant. Can I just ask on that point, the upcoming events bill, I think a few other members have signed up and either have contact with Alan, the chair, or received it through the Friends. I'm aware that we've had several sort of conversations here just around what members see. And I know last year obviously we had some terrible incidents at the park, which then resulted in sort of some offline conversations with members around what's our line of sight and what else is happening. Now, I don't want to bombard the committee with loads of data, but I think it is important that we get to some, and I don't want to generate another report. I think it's just making sure that we balance that out. But I think the key for me is making sure that all members of the committee are aware of what is going on in the park and can attend where they are able and willing to do so. So I know there's just somewhere, obviously we've got the dates of the events here in the report, and members can go out and look that up. But I wonder if there's some way of us just feeding that in, even if it's to town clerk, so that we just have a, and also I think it'd be helpful for me, because each and every time I'm there or we have an event, I go around obviously to most of you individually say, are you coming, what's happening? Yeah, so I'm just wondering, because I think that way we've got a bit of a longer lead-in time. It just means we also get significant to make sure we've got a presence. So I'm honestly very keen to have more presence, both outside of our big visits and something going wrong.
Thank you, Chairman. What we've been doing is creating an event calendar across the entire London open spaces and individually to each space. And what we can do is we'll liaise with the town clerk to ensure that that's sent to members, perhaps quarterly. And if there's major updates, we can send that as well to get diary holds in where possible, so members are aware of what's happening in the park. But large events, just the nice community stuff and just a nice day in the park, so they can time their visits accordingly. We're very happy and welcome the visits.
Thank you. Questions from members? Catherine and
Thank you. On the calendar, we have spoken at previous meetings about the committee, the approved visit.
yes.
I think it would be very good to include that in the calendar, because otherwise I'll be saying the same thing next year and next year. It keeps on long. Then I noticed that George Irvin is not only coming once with his merry-go-rounds, etc., etc. He's coming twice now, and he seems to be coming for a rather long time, and I'm concerned about the effect of that on other park users and the park itself in terms of impact. I don't know why it's something. So it's got 4 days in May, and then 9 days in July. 9 days seems a very long time for a fair. So it does have an effect on other users who are not likely on fairs.
I mean, I would have to declare an interest because I think it's absolutely fantastic, wonderful, and I think it's backed by popular demand. So I think local community will probably ask for double the 9, double the 7. But I completely take your point, Catherine, that we obviously have to balance that. Like so many open spaces out there, we've obviously seen a number of legal cases on the ground, the exclusivity of some, access, and the use of the people in the community. I think it's an important balance to strike. Personally, and my own view is that I think we've got absolutely bang on given what else we're doing during the course of the year, and that's something I've heard from people on the ground. But I will let Phil respond, I think, just on the actual operational question there and the impact on this, which is.
You're right.
Sorry.
So I just do my follow-up question.
There's 2, right.
The questions about floodlighting of the existing courts. It's likely to be an issue with presence of bats being affected by the floodlight, but that's something which needs to be considered. And the other thing which I'd like to raise is consideration for safe spaces for young women. There is some guidelines, I think, in Queen Elizabeth Park about in particular on account of the diversity of the inhabitants who live around the park users. I think it's extra important to have a space for young women because they're a group to consider. That we need to meet their needs as well.
Thank you. And that's a good point. I think looking at the strategy for violence against women and girls across London, I know we previously had, but I know there are 2 hubs in Stratford. So I suppose the question for us would be, what is the need? And I think also how would we facilitate that? I haven't seen that in the square mile and what one needs to go through in terms of accessibility on an ongoing basis, presence. It's more than having a dedicated space. There's a lot that comes into it. But I know when the office block in the park was cafe restaurant. That was something that happened. I know we've had conversations around the future of that building and having that sort of provision where that is something we could deliver, but perhaps also take a step forward of not just having a safe haven, but actually being able to actively create a space where young people, young women can come together and receive and find support or a support group. Not necessarily just a safe haven, but again, a good point. Bill, do you want to come in at this point, just to pick up those 2 points, the floodlights and that, and then we'll go to Ben and then.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Thank you for the questions. I would just also note that Parks for London did a good piece of work a couple of years ago on ensuring that open spaces are built with safety for women in mind. But I know had a number of representatives from women active in park management. We will look at that and reference that and build that into our planning where possible. For floodlighting, yes, we would be looking at any ecological impacts as well. And I know that, Charlotte has given that quite a bit of thought. If floodlighting would be needed for a future installation of a floodlighting facility, it would be something we would be discussing with this committee and be subject to a lot of review. Regarding the events in the park, I'll ask Susanna to come in on this as events as part of her portfolio.
Yeah, absolutely. So taking your point about inviting committee members, I'm absolutely happy to take responsibility for that. I think we've got a really nice programme across. It's great to hear that you think that the fair is really popular. It's certainly kind of what I think the word on the ground is. It's also an important income generator. It brings around £25,000 into the park. Overall, we're looking at events. So we're looking at both how we do work with communities. So that could be about working with a local group around an event specifically for women and girls, if we felt like that was a gap in the programme, but also looking at the capacity for the park for commercial events. In truth, I mean, we think the park is pretty at its limit at the moment. So it's good to hear that the main kind of commercial one is for most people popular, but obviously I know Charlotte's team have taken a lot of consideration about access to the space that it takes up, and also, the impact of noise, light.
Come in, if I may, Chair. So on the regards to the fair, I believe that you raised this last year, Catherine. So just to reiterate, the reason why the number of days were extended is because the days were much shorter last year, and what happened was there were huge queues to get into the fair area, and that was causing a problem. So we thought that if the number of days were extended, that it would be dissipated each day, and it would prevent queues and therefore sort of any damage or issues around each of the entrance gates. It's near the football ground area, so it's near to Linden Gate, and we just thought that extending it would be better for that purpose. Also, it's very popular and people were getting very upset when it was closing down. So we thought that based on the community and what the feedback we were getting, it was a good idea to extend it. We will review it. We review the ground conditions after each event, and the time of the year that we have planned it means that there should be minimal impact to the ground conditions. To come back onto the paddle and the floodlighting, as I put it into the report, it is just an idea at this stage. Nothing has been discussed, nothing has been agreed. If the Lawn Tennis Association has simply said that West Ham Park has been identified as being a suitable place to have covered courts for both tennis and paddle. By having covered courts means that there would be floodlighting under a cover. I have already made it very clear that there are bat roofs within the park and that we would have to consider the ecological issues within the park, but also that it is circumnavigated with residential properties, and that therefore any additional lighting we would have to take into consideration. And the last thing, in terms of safety of girls and women within the park, it's something that I'm very keen to address and I am looking at. And I'm working with a number of stakeholders with regards to sports to encourage girls and women to take more of an active role in those activities, whilst also feeling very safe to do so.
Yeah, Ben, sorry, Dan,
thank you, Chair. Just on the events and licensing section first. I mean, has West Ham Park actually got an events and licensing policy that goes alongside the fees and charges that we'll talk about later? Because that's really where members should be able to flex where they're happy for specific areas to be used at specific times of year for income generation. I think that will probably give some members clarity on what's being used when. So perhaps we can look at, you know, reflecting that in some way, shape or form as we go through the charities review. Coming back to the safety component, Mark, well done for your efforts there. That's really positive news. Could we just ask, though, at some stage to come back with a specific report that talks about both the commitments that have been made by the Met and Newham as our key partners in this? Because what we have found over quite some time now is there's a lot of talk but little actual action because everybody's so resource constrained, and I think it's important to keep an eye on that. And what the impacts of those things are, particularly on safety of the park. On CCTV, I'm pleased we've got the SRO for Safer Cities in the room as well, because we've obviously just gone through a massive upgrade of 4G CCTV, and I assume that's the new infrastructure that's been put in. It is 4G as opposed to a lower quality. But what I was just going to say is, in addition to that, what the city police and the environment team have done for the city is also now started to introduce there's AMPR and face recognition functionality software that's built into the CCTV that could be much more useful, particularly in bringing prosecutions where necessary. We have examples in the city police now where a case that would have taken 6 months took 30 minutes to put together for court. So there are huge benefits of doing some of these things. And actually, if there were a data sharing agreement with Newham and the Met Police in Newham, actually it could be really useful in sharing some of that intelligence and all access to funding for that on an ongoing basis.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, very good. That's a fascinating case.
Just briefly, I think it's a question, but another positive development is that we've been in communication with the city police, including the police commissioner, on how we can work more closely as a division, but also our staff, of course, it's not active, but in part in other spaces, to leverage all of the expertise in the infrastructure, security, and policing beneath the corporations. We think that was also a very positive step, and will hopefully also help us in engaging with Metropolitan Police. They'll have better relations with us. So we're looking for the right person to connect. We're trying to understand how we navigate that structure they've offered. Right.
I'll also add it.
Yes, sure.
Sorry. Further, I've also further to our meeting with that we had in the park with Newham councillors. I've reached out to individuals at Newham Council to try and ascertain and set up regular meetings, whether quarterly or monthly. And part of that process will be to exchange data so that we can see what's going on in the rest of the borough and whether it's reflective of what we may or may not be facing at West Ham Park. So I think we're moving in the right direction. We can also then compare it with the data of last year. So we now record all of our incidents and we log them digitally. So then we can see the number of incidents, the type of incidents, and we can compare it year on year.
Chair, if I could just add on that specific point, I mean, that data is published, it's available online for, and actually it's got a map that shows exactly where those incidents occur. But perhaps we work with the Newham councillors because they have a safer Newham committee that frankly I think you should have a seat on to be engaged in as a critical area within Newham. Perhaps the Newham councillors can help us get that. As we have that, for example, I think safer communities in Red Regional Forest, that model exists elsewhere.
And I think that would be a really good idea. And there's a local, I think they may have been contacted already, the local councillors who deal with that area. We of course also have our panels with the police, which look at the other parks in the area, ASB and nearby parks. So I think that would be very useful to feed in on. We can set it up.
Yeah, some very good points here. Just on again the data driven policy making responsibility is excellent. And I mean, I think anecdotal discussions with Parkland and a number of others. There are some notable SWOT facial recognition points in this. I've seen this person before. I know they go from here to there. Seems like we could be within grasping distance of sort of joined up, stitched together, quilted all of them, and track these movements, which so often dodge and weave between police forces and open spaces. Jane, on that one, I think as well, also, it's a good reminder that we have agreed that post-election, we will do something in the park for all local councillors.
Yes, yes.
New and newly elected and returning councillors. So I think part of it will be really taking some of these into defined actions. So to take and say, you're a new councillor, could you consider doing this in Newham Council? You know, as a strategic partner for us, the corporation.
Yeah.
But I think also, you know, for yourself and John, being able to have a sort of stronger link with that cohort
Yes.
as well. I think that's sort of, again, the three legs of the tripod, just giving us a bit of stability.
Yes, absolutely.
Wendy.
Back to the pump there, Chairman.
Yes.
As far as I'm concerned, it's in generation, but also there are very few places I think in Europe that if we did housing, which would be detrimental, I think, to, you know, to obviously enjoy it if they do to do the button. So I'm sorry, stay. I mean, twice a year, 3 times a year.
Yeah. Sympathise, and I think I feel like it was you or perhaps John who noted that for so many of Newham residents, our park is their holiday. And it's always struck me that, you know, we go through and it's a bit of recreation, and when we talk about our core aims, people to recreate and be well, that for so many of the local communities, that is their holiday. They go into their park, that is their respite, that is their escape, that is their well-being. And it's really important that we remember that. Thank you.
Chair. Ben, if I may, just on that point, I mean, we have seen success in some of the other open spaces where we actually create a sort of campaign pledge for candidates that are willing to sign up to supporting a particular number of things that are in the interest of West Ham Park, and then perhaps going to come and have a photo with the chair of West Ham Park at West Ham Park as one of their campaign material that may show residents that they're completely aligned. It's perhaps that's something that might be.
You know, there's two very distinct views on that. I mean, I completely agree. I mean, I think everyone should sign up to a campaign which is to, you know, improve, sustain, protect West Ham Park, certainly the local ones. And I know the deputy chair is the man in the likely giving you connections to the local MP and others. But yes, I entirely take the point. In all seriousness, I mean, I've got a sort of list of where people are. I mean, I don't know what are the views from members, just in terms of A, the principle, and then B, sort of putting something that we could sort of take to candidates. Maybe, Jane, as a local politician, I'll turn to you.
Yeah. I think it's a good idea, actually. I mean, they have got most of their materials now for campaigning, but it could be a point that they could bring out. You could really say for almost any Newham councillor, because we said in that discussion the other day, it's not just people who live in those wards adjacent, it's used throughout Newham.
Perhaps our engagement, not waiting until the dust is settled after the election.
Yeah.
Thinking about sort of 2 stages. So yes,
it could be extended to parks, actually, because as I said, we had a meeting the other day about ASB in Plaster Park and problems there. So obviously it's West Ham Park we're interested in. The council could be the safety in parks and sustaining and protecting them in general. Yeah, I'll raise, we have a meeting tonight, I'll raise the.
Very good. Perhaps you and I could have a chat after, talk around, just the last thing I want to do is stalk in.
Yes.
Campaign issue, but I think it's done sensitively. It's just amazing.
Yeah.
It's really tying them into the future of asset. But yeah, very happy to do that. Thank you. Any other questions or comments before we'll take us through the presentation, which was actually quite me. Thank you, Phil.
Thank you, Chairman. Just in the interest of time, I'll speak quickly.
No rush.
What we've got here is one of our gardener apprentices practicing and learning some new practical skills, working with the gardens between her coursework that she does on other days. So here's just cutting out rings along the tree base, which improves tree establishment and longevity, reduces competition, and improves soil moisture retention. So just some practical tasks and learning about practical gardening. Our apprenticeships, and we're proud to say that we do have an active apprenticeship scheme in the park, and we very much intend to keep that going. It's been a pathway to career progression at North London Open Spaces. The head of our horticulture team started as an apprentice 40 years ago. We very much want that to be a pipeline that continues on in the future. If anyone's been in the park recently, they will notice that some works happened on the timber arboretum in the garden. 7 beams were replaced, which were rotten. That work is now done. The contractor dismantled the old beams and replaced and braced the new beams, which are treated and stained, with what is a very gorgeous asset in the park in good repair for the future. I did note the toilet refurbishment, and Chairman, I will say, as a young man, I did not think I would spend so much of my day thinking and talking about toilets, but that is a big part of my life. But as I noticed, or as I noted previously, the works are underway. We do hope that they will complete by the end of January. And we think this will be a very welcome improvement in the park. We're already getting positive feedback. Volunteering and school engagement continues to be a real strength in the park. 2,000 spring flowering bulbs and daffodils were added to the ornamental gardens. And we have a picture here of one of the volunteers from that session doing that. And we also have year 12 students from St. Bonaventure's Secondary School who've been volunteering in the park, carrying out tasks like litter picking, leaf clearing, planting in the ornamental garden as part of an overall enrichment program. We very much want to keep that going. The learning team and the Friends of West End Park are very critical partners with volunteering, with learning, with bringing schools in. And again, I think it really reflects, as you said, Chairman, how much this is a critical asset for the entire community. I believe I noted previously that we were doing some reseeding in the grass, so we've blocked off some areas to make sure that that can come back in a sustained footfall again in the heavy months. So if you see some fencing up, it is for a very good cause. I noted earlier Park in the Dark and a food drive that was done by the Friends of West End Park, and here's a picture of that day. Again, it's a wonderful event that they put on that draws the entire community in, and really grateful for the partnership that we have with the Friends of West End Park. The learning team continues to be very active in the park. Preparation is underway for the first World Book Day at West Ham Park, which will take place on the 5th of March. We'll make sure that that goes onto members' calendars, as discussed earlier. And children will be taking part in activities which promote enjoyment of both books and the park. And the event will include a launch of a new children's book library in the park. And what we've got here are some designs for bookmarks for the kids to color, which have been designed by a local illustrator. Is that up there? So, who's that? The illustrator? The illustrator. The illustrator is Salvatore Robina. I noted earlier the enrichment program by St. Bonaventures, and here are some pictures that were taken as part of that program that were led by our comms team. So we've got our comms professionals coming out and working with them on some photography and some other active activities within the park. And I must say that the year 12 students' photos are much better than the ones I take when I'm in the park, so I may have to attend a training myself. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Excellent. So any other hands waving up? Yeah, I think at this stage we'll move to item 5, which is the risk management update. Emily, you're going to update that.
I am, thankfully, yes. Unfortunately, Joe is unable to be with us today, so I've got to cover that item for her. This item, this risk report is mainly for information. But I'm happy to take any questions. I think there are just hold that bear with me a second. I'm just going to report on a couple of items. So 3 risks were reported in detail by exception. The decline in the condition of assets, that was reported in detail because it's one of 2 red risks. Work-related stress, that was reported in detail because it's the second red risk and is a particular concern and interest. And antisocial behaviour, that's closely linked to the work-related stress. So Bill and Charlotte can take questions on the work-related stress and antisocial behaviour. And if there are any questions from members on the declining condition of assets, I think we can take that back to City Surveyors. I'm not sure if anyone from City Surveyors is on the call, but if they are, then I'll be able to answer. If not, then I can take that back and goes back and follow up with them afterwards. But I'm happy to receive any questions from members.
Excellent, thank you. it's no thanks to Joe for the update and the reports.
Yes.
I think also helpful, again, as I said earlier, that we have had a meeting where there's already been discussion around some of the mitigation to these risks, which I think is hopefully giving members more comfort than we had certainly 6 or 7 months ago around the elevation of these risks, both probability and impact wise. Are there any specific questions from members? We'll go Ben and then.
Thank you. And it's, I guess probably to Matt more than anyone else on the issue of the decline in the position of assets.
Yeah.
We've just gone through a really useful process in looking at the assets, what is funded through the works programme and what isn't. And I don't know what that looks like for West Ham Park. Perhaps we can get that list that perhaps specific to West Ham Park so that members are aware of what is funded. And then Bill can have the overlay of what isn't funded that needs to fit into the 5-year plan.
Yeah, and again, I think it's a really good point because we've seen it slightly fragmented in terms of, you know, the property on the park, the sites. We've seen in isolation, but I think all members probably universally agree it would be helpful to see that list. And yeah,
and the difference between the built assets, which are traditionally covered, and the non-built assets, including things like digital assets from CCTV and other things that we have in ongoing maintenance.
Absolutely, very good point. Take that. Unless there's anyone that can give us a definitive answer here. Oh, yeah, Katie enters.
Yeah, so just to sort of give a bit of assurance, we tested a little bit of this in the reports committee earlier this week, the weeks running together, earlier this week, I think, actually. So we very much recognise the fact that we are not as transparent as we should be with our committees in terms of the assets that we've got and giving you some greater level of assurance. As you say, listing those assets, where are they at, where are they need. So Matt Collier, our head of states, is working with us in terms of what that reporting can look like going forward. We did just do for the Reports Committee a report on cyclical works programme. So again, we can look at something similar for the next meeting of this committee, and again, just test out the level of information that we're doing here. So happy to do that. Probably, I would imagine, as part of the Assistant Director's report, but we'll look at what that can look like. So having taken that discussion.
Excellent.
And just to add that members will receive a detailed risk report in April.
Yes,
And
that's it.
My bit of if the surveyors have completed their survey of condition of assets, this maybe I've just missed something, but it's always been a bit behind that. So I'll be pleased to know, maybe that could be related to mapping. See where they were and when they last surveyed. So what survey cycle? One question. And the other question is, if you update me on what's happening to the number of staff, because I think one of the reasons why I'm discussing it is because of the lack of the insufficient number of staff. And that is raising a lot of that. I want to know what's happening right.
I just add a point to that before the executive director comes in, which is I know we've been talking about right sizing the organisation and comparing our green spaces to other green spaces and looking at how much funding they have, what the staffing is, what the operational structures are. And I think there's probably a piece of work that will allow us to answer some of those questions, because we all seem to think that we're understaffed, but actually when we do a comparison, often we find that we're not. So I think we probably need to get that evidence based.
So we can both of those points. So on the condition of assets, we'll make sure that's part of the report. So I'm not sure that we do have some surveys on it unless now wants to add it. So I think we can bring that as part of that overview. In terms of the staffing numbers, the overall budget, we're coming on to the budget later, but we have we had the conversation with the finance committee to say actually we do feel that we need more budget, but obviously that's going to be subject to a business case. That will give us some breathing space to actually do exactly that benchmarking, to look at what is a safe level of staffing. And again, your point in terms of level stress to the other levels of staffing. So we're working very closely with our Chamberlain's team, so the finance team, to look at what additional resource we might need very much subject to that review, benchmarking of this, and space is a part of that review. So again, we'll cite the committee as we.
Thank you. Sponsors. Can we please then move to item 6, which is the 5-year business plan? Bill, this is update from deliver. I was going to talk later on, but I need to talk about the position on rebaselining to set forward the delay in us being presented with and agreeing budget. I think in this context, Bill, I think it's important that it has confidence, but the point around resourcing and the delivery of the 5-year plan, I know this goes back to the previous item, but that you have confidence and give confidence and feel that that will be achievable without having to call on potential future resources that are not yet defined. And I know you've noticed that this may need to be updated as a different interval, but I'd be grateful for you if you just in your remarks touch on that process for you.
Absolutely. Excuse me. Absolutely. Thank you, Chairman. So members will be aware that the open spaces are now taking a new approach to planning work and doing 5-year business plans. Began last year, and these will be rolling 5-year plans where we update each successive year, learning from the previous year. This is a new way of working, so this will continue to evolve, certainly in the next year or two, and will particularly evolve as we move into the new grant funding model and the Natural Environment Charity Review, which provides, I would say, a more clear, distinct, and digestible local risk budget against which we can plan. So that will be a welcome development as well. What I have provided here is the latest iteration of the 5-year business plan. It is necessarily focusing on this coming year and the next year. We're still developing our ability to look further out. And that is to some extent, as you know, Chairman, dependent upon the resources that we have or maybe on coming online as well. I mentioned this last year, but I think, as you know, Chairman, it's really important to note that the business plan is our best articulation and our best estimate as officers on what we think we reasonably get done in one given year. We really want to identify those tasks that are most priority, that we think we can get done in 1 year or whatever the defined time frame is, to focus on those and really try to deliver on time. There has been a significant amount of change in various things that have happened in the corporation in the last several years, as well as a backlog of activities that are now coming online. And what our team has done is spent a lot of time thinking about what we think we have the best chance of doing. Our ability to project and our ability to estimate that will continue to evolve and be refined as well. But our team gave a lot of thought to what we think we can get done and then report on to committees. And what we very much want to do and what we'll be doing is using this as a tool for delivery. This is not a plan that we will write every year and stick on the shelf and then perhaps write a report on the end of the year. It's very much as a management tool that we'll be talking about as a senior management team at North London, and that the heads of service will be discussing with their teams as well. It is laid out here. I did take the point from numerous members last year that the type was a bit too small to read, so I did my best with some frustrating challenge with Microsoft Excel, but I hope that it is a bit better this year and easier to understand. And I would just specifically note that Susanna will provide a report later today, but a fair amount of actions in this year and the next year are going to be related to standing up a fundraising effort, where we're starting from stop, essentially, in a lot of respects. So you see a lot of this work is building the infrastructure and getting us to a place where we can do that. Now, we'll of course be doing activities and fundraising and leaning into commercial endeavors where appropriate, and of course in balance with ecological needs of the park. But we need to stand up that infrastructure and make sure that we can crawl, walk, and then run. And we very much want to be at a sprint, but in the right time, and when we've done the things that allow us to succeed. So you'll see those work streams in the business plan as well.
How to communicate and contextualize to start? How to communicate and contextualize to start, not only in Western Park, I imagine that that's for other open spaces, and then sort of beyond that, sort of the reverse feedback in terms of what you then hear and how that's considered.
Yeah, it's a good question. So Charlotte and Susanna and our other heads of service will have to develop this with their managers and their next level down to senior rangers, and making sure that they can feed in and say, this is what we think we can get done in a year. Now, the business plans are projects or new initiatives or new work streams. It represents the minority of work. The bulk of work of what we do is the day-to-day, litter picking, cleaning toilets, mowing lawn, the cyclical stuff, the business as usual. But these are new initiatives, and some of these initiatives, once they're completed, will then become business as usual. We need to have resourcing conversations and discussions around those. And that, again, I think is a new way of working, certainly in a resource constrained environment. We need to make sure not only that when we add new initiatives, that when they transition to BAU, where that happens, we know that we have enough resource to keep them going. These will be communicated regularly to staff. We'll be doing regular internal updates. We'll provide updates probably midway through the year and at the end of the year for this committee. We anticipate to submit a report on last year's business plan to this committee once the fiscal year has ended. And it again is a management tool. We will be inviting feedback from the staff to see if we did as a team a good job of estimating where things can be done. Inevitably, things will change. This is true of any business plan and any operation. But this is what our team thinks we can do this year. When significant updates are coming or we think we need to change things, we will communicate that and have a conversation with the committee, of course. Excuse me, and I would just note that once this is approved, we will focus on these activities. If any new major initiatives or proposals or projects or opportunities arise, we will then have a conversation about whether or not it can be accommodated and how it can be accommodated. Any pushing or pulling needs to happen with existing work streams to make that possible. So we're really grateful for the committee and supporting us in this new approach, and we welcome any feedback. And we look forward to making this very much a live conversation as we develop and evolve these plans, and this really becoming the core way that we plan and deliver our work in the park in addition to the BAU.
And I thought what's brilliant is what we've seen in the last 12 months is really looking at outcomes and impact as a result of what was, black and white at the very beginning of that process. And that to me is just it's a really good outcome.
Thank you, Chair. I would just like to say that you set very high standards for our space in the days of plenty.
Yes.
I think the officers should be congratulated that they maintain those high standards on the contrary it used to be.
Fully agree.
Can I obviously echo that? But the one thing I don't know, how do you deal with matters which, so to speak, partly non-public, but one of the things that is clear, I don't know which category it comes into, is all the time an effort the team are having to spend on dealing with the nursery side. There's a public process, there's a local plan, the rest of that. It's not in your business plan. It's not even in the grey area. In fact, actually kind of where it belongs, the work stream primarily delivered by partners but comprise considerable amount of work coordination by West End Park and lost staff, just the category. Is that where it would sit? Or I mean, how does it, because it's clearly taken a long time with Andrew Evans' time, which otherwise would be spent on things elsewhere. So how does it fit in?
It's a good question. We thought about that. Now, the nursery project has been largely handled by Andrew, who sits within the National Environment Division, of course, but outside of London. This is representing our task, but I think it's a fair point that we do have liaison, we do site meetings, we do participate in that process. So I think that does need to be added in the right place and make sure that we've accounted for it. So that's an additional link to make.
Thank you. Great point. And Andrew can give us his final tally the way out of all these great methods and how much time they've taken. I mean, in all seriousness, I have asked Bill, and I know we've had a conversation anecdotally as to how much time we spend on governance matters, particularly preparing reports for this committee. And I guess members know one of the things we must ensure is that the reports are coming here. We understand the reason and basis for them being presented at that meeting and in the cycle, but equally that we're, officers are making best use of their time. And I'm very keen that over the next cycle we begin to refine that lens and that focus. Not to in any way remove or undermine what should be done here, either from a statutory perspective or from guidance of officers, but I'm like many quite, I'm very keen that we reduce the amount of time officers are spending in drafting and writing reports. And I think to your point, Wendy, as part of cutting our cloth and the time we have available to us, certainly in this interim period, in the sort of 1 to 3 within that time period, I'm particularly keen that we don't end up in a position where officers are giving out of what is allocated time and resource just to keep the status quo. So.
Just one point of that. I come from a corporate background, and I think reports are all too long and they duplicate themselves. I read the statement again and again So someone's having to write that statement, I just think going forward, shorter is better. And do far more concise.
Yeah. I think it's one of those things. Yeah, a great politician said it's you know, to give an hour speech, 30 seconds preparation, to give a 5 minute speech, 3 hours preparation. So as I've often said, and coming from a corporate like you and being to particular methods of risk, I know how difficult it is to simmer and work through that funnel to get to critical points. But I think
I just think having that in mind, and that's the point about having a 5-year business plan. Lots of businesses have business plans, and just as you said, they put in the drawer. It's great to hear that that's not your approach. That's to have it at your review meetings and have it there in front of you. It's great to hear. There's not many people do that.
indeed, and I think we will continue that conversation. You know, why this review, why this committee, why is often, and can it be shorter? Yeah.
Yes, thank you. I was just going to pick up on page 22, Bill, under our work plan. Yeah, listed under the funding source, local particularly charity. Is that an error?
There's very much typo, but I think protecting it.
The one thing that I thought really is missing from the 5-year business plan is transformation. And I understand that funding is obviously one part of that. And I would actually suggest the funding source where it is unallocated loan, filtering that at the end, because it looks like we're promising something that's completely unfunded at the moment and is nice to have if we ever get there. But I do think, you know, how automation, how the use of some tools can help us achieve things that are done manually today is really to fit into a 5-year business plan. I also think that what we'd like to see against now the 5-year business plan is what are the key expected impact KPIs, you know, how are we going to measure the output of this and with what frequency, and which policies therefore are going to kind of align to that too. The last one is just how are we actually going to consult on the output of this with user groups and stakeholders as opposed to just internal constituents. Thank you, Chair.
And it's on page 16, item 6 on the playground. It suggests we're going to install a more suitable parameter in the playground. Maybe just install the new playground. And who advised us of the unsuitable ground material in the playground? And it does concern me. We spend large amounts of money on revamping the playground, and then next year or next years it's unsuitable.
Well,
I haven't led them.
she's been involved in it.
I picked it up. It was completed before I commenced with the video corporation. So, but what I noticed that there was quite a lot of wear and tear. And when I spoke to the local team, they said it wasn't suitable. So, and when we've looked at it, it went through the necessary procurement procedure. So I can't comment on what the specification was and why it was chosen at that particular time. What I have been doing is liaising with the local team and seeing what would be better. And we have been doing some patch repairs where it's eroded. So underneath the swings, for example, and we do have some allocated budget left within that project. So what I'm working is with the project team to see if we can reallocate that funding so we can then make good use of it and then put a better, which is tiger mulch. We'd like to put some tiger mulch down across the playground, which is hard wearing and is more suitable in terms of it has a longer durability as well. And across all of the playgrounds, this is the best material that we have found. Wet pool, for example, needs constant repairs to it. It's costly. So that's what I meant by unsuitable. So I can't unfortunately comment on the reasons why the original material was picked.
Members, I'm going to move us on, staying with Bill on themes about charters. Bill, I think a conversation that obviously we've had several times before in this committee. Here, I suppose, almost in our discussions is this balance between the financial sustainability and future of the charity, but also acknowledging the fact that we have a very different local community to many of these private open spaces. Sounds like that there is a sort of policy framework in this, how that's assessed. Again, having had a brief look at what is charged elsewhere, I'd say competitive is probably being, it's an understatement in terms of what we're charging. So I don't think there's a question there. I think the inflationary increase is entirely necessary, but I'm obviously aware that is only one part of the increased cost that we face in parks. And right now we're all being challenged on how we make this sustainable in the future. So I'm just particularly keen to sort of hear about that thought process in terms of the balance that's struck.
Very much, Chairman. And as you know, we own and operate and care for these spaces so people use them, and we want to make sure that people avail themselves of the various opportunities. As you know, we need to look at the unique communities that surround these spaces and making sure that we're accessible to them specifically, as well as everybody generally. We do a fair amount of benchmarking, as you will have seen, to make sure that it is competitive, for lack of a better word, with the local community in Newham. This is a work in progress. The fees and charges is now being refined. We're really fortunate to have Susanna in place, having started a few months ago, and she'll be doing additional work on this throughout this year with our team, with Charlotte's team, the events team, to further refine these and make sure that not only are we benchmarking and choosing appropriate fees that allow people in, that we're meeting our needs and our desires and indeed our mandate to generate revenue in an appropriate way where necessary, making sure that we're building in operational costs, any forthcoming capital improvements, and really taking a very quantitative approach to this. We've done a lot of work in the last year to refine the approach, and as you will see, the report is a bit more structured than it has been in years past. We're laying out to committee members exactly what we will do, how we will go through the process, how we report. So it is very much a work in progress, but we do believe the fees that we have in place and what we're proposing to increase by inflation, which of course the charity incurs inflationary increases as well, remains appropriate, reflective of surrounding rates. And what we're doing is making sure, again, that we take a more quantitative approach and forward looking and thinking about if we need to resurface a tennis court or we need to put in new cricket pitches, how and when we build that in. We will, of course, love to fund that through grants and external funding where possible, make our athletic and other activity offers as affordable as possible, but we are going to have to make some business-oriented decisions and balance that, of course, with accessibility.
May I ask a question about one of the fees?
Yes.
Which I think is too low, sorry. I think that the tennis annual pass is incredibly low. It's on page. I'm mindful that we want to increase revenue. I also appreciate that we want to reflect the local area. I play tennis there, so I do know who plays tennis there, and I know that it is going to a significant number of the particularly young men and women who play tennis, but many of whom are city workers on really good salaries. So to me, we could look at an increase of that fee, because even at £100 a year, I would happily pay that.
Yeah, and this is a very important challenge. This is what is any immediate response to that?
Yeah,
point?
I'll let Charlotte come in detail because she has been spending a fair amount of time looking at data on tennis. Big good question. I know these are very active playing in the parks and the activity levels very well. And Charlotte's been looking at this and also been in communication with the LTA to get a sense of tennis more broadly. The tennis pass, this does not provide unlimited play for the stated fee. What this does do is give a preferential booking ability, but I'll ask Charlotte to come in more detail because she's had a chance to look at it.
I take your point that it could be increased. However, last year we made the decision to remove the household membership, which caused some issues for some individuals. But what we foresaw by doing that was that there would be an increase then in the annual membership, which is exactly what has happened. Conversations with Newham and also with the LTA is that our fee is representative of Newham Borough. So if we increase it too much, we will then outcompete ourselves and they will go to the other nearest parks and tennis courts, which is Stratford. And there are others within the locality, which would therefore, we would source ourselves as such. So there is a balance between making it a suitable fee so that we can cover our costs, but it's also accessible. We are aware that the demographic is very different in Newham compared to other boroughs, so we want to make it available and accessible for those that may not be able to afford an increase in the annual membership. We're working very closely, like I said, and I've looked at all of the courts within the vicinity, and if we increase it too much, it wouldn't be within keeping with the rest of the borough.
Just in the fact that obviously Newham are going through their budgeting process at the moment, so I assume we're basing this on last year's fees and charges. Given the financial constraints Newham are up against, I would imagine that does go up this year, and it may just be worth delegating some authority should that happen, and there is an opportunity to make sure we are in line with market.
Could I make a suggestion that there is borough, if you live in Europe, there's a rate.
Newham rate.
Yeah, but if you live in the city, Canary Wharf, which a lot of the play, you know where they live in the city, that we have an out of borough rate, because I just don't think it reflects enough what a good deal that is if you're looking to that.
All duly noted. All duly noted.
That would have my full support, I imagine. Yes, I see nods from our committee as well, so really clear steer there. Thank you. Really helpful.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you for the question. This is the exact conversation we're hoping to have. Just to clarify, it sounds like delegated authority is being given to monitor Newham's pricing and make sure we may not align with them and make necessary changes, reasonable changes if and when necessary.
Correct. Okay, seeing nods from the great.
I'm a bit confused because it says on paragraph 15, the inflation rate of 4.5. Then it says where the increase is 2.7. So if you're going for a 2.7 increase, I think you should acknowledge that is much lower than the inflation rate of 4.5, or have I got something wrong?
What page is that?
27, 15, and then
Yeah,
16.
paragraph 15.
4.5, except for the limited exceptions listed in 1. The impact of inflation, an increase of 2.7 was adopted by the committee 25-26, equivalent to the rate of inflation.
What this is doing, Catherine, is noting that last year's increase was also equivalent to inflation. And last year, the 12-month RPI was 2.7, this year it's 4.5.
But then the conclusions are on 32, it should be increased by the same as last year.
Yes.
Rather than 4.5.
That's a mistake.
Yes.
That it was increased by 4.5,
Okay.
and that is my typo, as you can tell, I'm using a word format.
Thank you. Yes, noted.
Thank you.
Interestingly, we also use October as the RPI benchmark for all the other open spaces fee charges. Interesting to see what you said over here. But there is a good reason for October because of financial reporting and other things that impact RPI.
Yeah. The reason we've chosen September is because we know that that will be available. Now, at North London, we have 4 different spaces on 4 different committee sites with 4 different consultation timelines, which means we have to write these very well in advance. And we are confident that when we begin that very long multi-month walking committee process, September will be available. So that's why that's been chosen. Yeah, but that's the short answer.
Thanks, Phil. I'm conscious now of time, and also the fact that the previous item was also for decision. So members, just for the sake of the record and town clerk, could we please approve 5-year business plan item 6, and then also approve, subject to the comments made in delegated authority on the item 7, the fees and charges, voting the out of city rate. Is that
Just clarify,
Yeah.
proposing to delegate authority to town clerk in consultation with the chair and deputy chair to approve the update to the existing fees and charges, noting that expenses will go back and
yes?
Just a query.
Yeah.
As the document set by the coaches, the coaches that a facility of 2 people.
We will now move to item 8, which is the 2637 some new capital budgets. Marguerite and Naranja, you're going to keep this together? Yes, back to you.
That,
Can I just check that you can be heard online? I'm not quite sure where you're sat going. Caroline, sorry, I can't think what's his name on there. I can see now Tim in the middle. I'm just going to, can one of you just shout, you can't hear Marguerite or Naranja?
say hello or something.
I can hear you. Sorry, I'm dealing with the hamster teeth thing as well. So, but yes, I can hear you. Thank you.
Just to give a quick brief update on the grant funding model principles status of the approval process. So further to consultations and the Natural Environment Committee discussions, the January Finance Committee have now approved the grant funding model principles and arrangements, which are now due to go to Policy and Resources Committee in February for final approval and to be applied then from the 1st of April 2026. So that's the background to the 26-27 budget. The charity review co-sponsors have delegated authority to finalise the formal framework document in consultation with committee chairs and deputy chairs, which is the summary of those principles and arrangements, which will then be made available publicly. At the same time as the grant funding model principles went to Finance Committee, we also made a provisional ask to Finance Committee in that paper in relation to all the charities for a baseline enhancement to the resource envelope to support safe operations and transformational funding to support an effective transition to the grant funding model. In relation to West Ham Park charity, that comprised an additional 100,000 baseline funding, which reflects challenges during 25-26 and is based on bills, figures for staffing, ideally, and structural staffing, but specifically those that will support safe operations. It also included some transitional funding for outline planning for the West Ham Park nursery site to the tune of £110,000. And finally, we also put in last for 1 month of free reserves. So that was in response to feedback during the consultation process about the need to establish free reserves in the new grant funding model environment. All of that is a provision, those are provisional numbers, and they're subject to business cases and a health and safety review to help prioritise the funding allocated, and also going to an earlier point, workforce efficiency review to make sure that the right staff and structures are in place. Those business cases will be so the co-sponsors have delegated authority in discussion with the Finance Committee Chair and Deputy Chair to review those business cases, and a contingency has been set aside. So I wanted to just set that first so that there is a context for the 26-27 budget approval. In terms of the budget as it's set out, the budget is presented with the budget estimate, which is given sort of top down, and we're asking for approval of that budget whilst noting the provisional ask for additional baseline funding. I just also wanted to mention it's the first time that we'll see the budget presented in the charity style. So we've presented it in both the deficit funding model way, which you're familiar with, local risk, central risk, etc., but also now in the statement of financial activity style, so that you can see how we plan to report that in the future to give greater clarity. The focus there is on core grant, so that is the local risk equivalent that is being negotiated. That is the main grant funding that allows the operation to break even, so that is the target there. And we've also now split unrestricted and restricted activities so that you can clearly see how restricted funds are being used as opposed to the unrestricted activity. You'll be aware from principles and arrangements that we've established a core grant, which is effectively local risk operations, and then an additional grant, which will be equal and opposite for other elements that are still subject to the project review, such as CWP or any corporate recharges. I'm going to hand over to Naranjan unless there are any questions on that, and Naranjan could talk to the detail of the budget if you have any questions.
Thanks, Chair. So yeah, today we are asking members to approve grant funding of 2.574 million for the 2026-27 Western Park Revenue Capital budgets. This consists of a full grant of £759,000 being managed by the superintendent, additional grants of £1.7 million split across the city surveyors, CWP and recharges, along with £115,000 in capital expenditure. This is an overall increase of £327,000 from 2025-26, the breakdown of which can be found on Appendix 2. The main contributor of this increase is the transfer support service staff budgets from the National Environment Directorate and the rephasing of CWP backlog, which you will find the full list of the CWP 2026-27 schedule reflected in spring. In regards to the adequacy of the funding, paragraph 6 outlines the intention to submit business cases to access contingency funds held by the Finance Committee. Margaret has already outlined what those items would be. Thank you. Any questions?
Yeah, can I just understand how this contingency works? Because it suggests there was a sort of rebaselining. As I understand it, you're not obviously the only open space dealing with this. But the idea was to say, look, our current budget sets you've just described around doing this just increase in the normal way. But in addition to that, there's actually additional work as contingency that's just explained. There's 100,000 on the baseline, 110,000 relating to the nursery site, and then a free reserves point. Now the free reserve is a separate question. I mean, it's really interesting that you've gone for 1 month. I presume that gets held by finance committee. That's question one. Is we're not having to manage 139,000. Because if we were a charity in a normal way, we would have to have a finance committee, we would have to invest it, we would have to look after it. So I'd like to know who looks after it. But the more important thing is looking at your staffing statement for 26-27, which is a paragraph 12, which clearly envisages an increase in staff, plus the re-baseline, suggests that the budget we should be approving has to have an extra 100,000. Because otherwise you're asking us to approve a budget that doesn't do the job. Now, that comes back to how does this contingency work? It sounds like you've got a long way with the finance committee, not all the way that this committee needs or need other open space. Because the budget I'm being asked to approve doesn't do the job. So how do we square that circle? So two things. Firstly, just technically, to reserve was work. The second is, can you just give us a little bit more on the contingency? And if you really think that we are short 100,000, why isn't that in the budget?
So if I take the reserves policy that point first, that's a provisional number, and there were discussions during the consultation for the grant funding model transition around reserves and the need to establish those. West Ham Park doesn't currently hold any reserves whatsoever. So there'll be a policy paper to this committee, I hope next time, for full discussion on whether that is the most appropriate level, what that looks like, what the options are, and whether there should be any further designations of reserves. So I'd like to bring a full paper to this committee. In terms of the approval,
technically, who holds the money?
So the money, well, at the moment, all banking is done by the city on behalf of the charities, and there's no, at the moment, there's no sort of talk of changing that, because obviously those corporate services are provided by the city. The other question around the process of the contingency, I think what is being asked of the approval of the budget is to approve the budget pending and noting that this rebaselining is considered necessary to function and have funding for safe operations. But the detail of that is currently being re-looked at by Bill and myself. Are working through a meeting today to go through that in further detail. And so a business case, when the health and safety review has reported, and also the workforce efficiency review, will then go to the finance committee for discussion. But I would envisage that there will be involvement of committee members, and I think that perhaps you're approving the budget pending further discussion, noting the business case, and that you are satisfied that that is sufficient. I think that makes most sense. But the word, the recommendation is worded in that way to keep us on track with the budget approval process.
Certainly discussion we had here. Thank you. Sorry, can I just at this point note that I am generally a fast learner. I've just realised that I think all committees are 2 hours, and ours is actually scheduled for 90 minutes, isn't it?
Yes, but the natural environment board is scheduled to either start at 11 or at the rising facility. So
Right, so we don't, okay, good, I just wanted to check. Yeah, okay, excellent, thank you very much. So, but then,
well,
oh, sorry, what do you mean? Okay, so anyway, head for left.
You can't miss me. though.
Sharp left there.
Thank you. I think the point on actually maintenance funds and reserves is a really important, particularly for income on sports facilities that we know attract an ongoing maintenance cost. So I think trying to think about that is certainly really important. The other thing I think that to call out that members aren't really clearly aware of based on the conversations of the finance committee is the funding is currently only allocated for 1 year if approved. And that's important when you're talking about staffing that need a longer term commitment to be able to get the right people into the right spaces. So it is difficult, and perhaps on the basis that there is a risk here that isn't approved based on the reviews, we use the risk register to reflect that now.
I support
I've just been looking at some of the appendix 3. And I'm not surprised we're replacing a boiler in the nursery building complex. But the nursery isn't used as a nursery.
Well, is that for the staff section of the nursery? So it's a 5-year-old list.
It's a boiler.
Oh, is that?
And also, there are a large number of boilers being replaced in lodges. And I want to check that those are all modern boilers and in which relate, are they pump schemes or whatever, environmentally efficient boilers. Then we're also spending a lot of money on the vehicle shed in the nursery area. Right. But I just wonder if that's correct. We're refurbishing something that's going to be
Well, yeah.
I can, but we are making improvements to the vehicle shed. It's very active operational space where vehicles, equipment, part of the operation of the park. I think that we know. Thought the future of the nursery will be that continuing for the park. The city surveyor's department are implementing environmentally progressive and state-of-the-art improvements when they make these, such as heat pumps and things that are beyond my professional expertise, but I know are very good for the environment. And I think as Ben noted, there are some items under that are from the dated list, but we have been in close communication with the city surveyor department, and I want to assure you that any unnecessary repairs that were previously identified for the nursery will not go ahead.
So we can vote to approve.
Can I then amend the recommendation? That we
Yes.
You add the point that it needs to go onto the risk register that the emergency may not happen.
To the risk register.
And we're noting the contingencies. We here it says review and approve the proposal draft written budget West End charity for approval by finance committee. Based on contingency. It seems that we are, well, you see, we're relying on the contingency. I'm not sure which way it goes if you don't get it.
Just add something, Chair. I think the finance committee have been pretty clear that if there is a real health and safety expectation that something is done, it will be done because there is clearly a reason to do so. However, the expectation is that cuts will be made within the budget to facilitate that because there is no new money within City to say and we continue to draw it down and uphill. So I would just urge a bit of caution.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
Yes. So I think, depending on what comes from the business case, if for some reason we don't get budget that you're asking, I do think we have to come back here to say what are the things that we would get at. So to not do, we would need to bring you as a committee some options in terms of how we then reconcile the budget, and it would probably then impact on the business plan because we'd be saying actually we can't continue to do it safely everything. So I do think there's probably an additional item that we might need to just commit to do if we are not successful. And as Ben says, there are decisions that the finance committee will need to make, as to where the money will need to come from. So there are a few things that need to happen before we can give you the assurance that we'll about the business plan still. So we can bring it.
So then, yes, Scully then just adds the recommendation of one of adding it to the register.
Yes.
We
Yes.
just have the wording for that confirmed, so that is reviewing and approving proposed draft budget and the second recommendation. And have you read out the options that you can determine the exact wording?
I don't know if it's too long, but on the second recommendation, we can add, so that not only those things and add it to the risk register. There is that if something sought from finance committee is not
And noting the contingency.
Are we content to agree?
Agreed. Yes.
So we'll stay with you then for item 9, which is the operational finance progress for 2022.
So the Q2 progress report, we should project Q3, that means that we budget. The overspend as a result of the rise in criminal activity from last summer, resulting in the need for additions of community resources, such as park, art, security, and CCTV. West Ham Park do not currently have reserves to draw upon, so strategy finance team are seeking support from the finance committee that the overspend will not carry forward into next year. The current outstanding debts as of Q2 are £525. This has since reduced to £225 as of Q3, and no capital expenditure is forecast.
Just one question on that, if I may, Chair, which was, why wasn't the director or the executive director's risk used for that, given it was an in-year risk-based expense, opposed to overspending local risk?
This is an ongoing. It's a good question. I think this is we're actually looking at it now, so I think this is important. So if I may, we can take that. This is part of the consistency of how we do budgets here at the corporation, and I think you might actually want to challenge that. We are challenging that. So we will take that away as action. It is being.
I think it would be good if we go into a budget round saying we're within budget.
Yes, I absolutely. This is genuinely out of it. This is the risk that we see within the
yeah.
Just that.
Yeah. Thank you, Regina, again, Margaret, for that. So now, shall we move on to item 10, which is the fundraising?
Yeah.
Mark.
Absolutely. Yeah, so this report, which is for information, and I hope you had a chance to read, is a high level update on our plans and approach with fundraising at West Ham Park. So we are at a really early stage, as Bill pointed out. This is alongside both the Natural Environment Charity Review, but also the development of the grant funding model. So there's still a lot of basics to do, not least with budgets. And for me in fundraising, both in terms of the park as a whole, and individual projects, we really need to understand very simply how much is needed, for what and for why. So basically creating that place for support for both individual projects and also, say, the park and the communities as a whole. So working with stakeholders is really central to this, both the committee members, friends of, wider community, visitors, visitors to the park, and really critical for me is working with the officers and especially the expert staff on the park. And making sure they've got the capacity to support fundraising. They're not asking for the money, but they'll be delivering a lot of the the work that we're funding. So that might be around shaping a bid and identifying funds, making introductions, and as I said, also measuring impact and building trust, and creating a legacy as a charity. So over the next 12 months, we'll be writing this strategy for voluntary income generation, setting out the principles, the priorities, and then the sort of active steps needed to do this. And we want to take the time to do this well. We'll be driven by the park's charitable, this is easy to say, charitable objects, which you've mentioned already, which is sort of to maintain the park for the resort and the recreation of adults and playgrounds for children, which is a fantastic mission to be led by, alongside the natural environment's wider mission to protect and enhance open spaces. But that doesn't mean that's all I'm going to be doing with my year. There is plenty to do. As mentioned in the report, earned income or commercial income is out of scope of this particular paper, but is very much part of my role and our focus. So thinking about for West Ham Park, particularly filming, events, as we've mentioned, and also things like corporate volunteering, a little bit of a grey area around sort of what's earned and what's voluntary. But certainly there's scope to develop that on the park, which is fantastic for generating a little bit of income for the actual activities and in-kind, obviously, benefits, but also really important bridge for much more strategic corporate partnerships. And I think that's a really good, should be a priority for the park, given its location, and it's also what it's there to do for the community. I think it could be a really popular project for corporates to work with. And there's also, as we said, like a lot of platforms and processes that enable fundraising and stewardship. So a charity bank account that sits alongside online giving platforms. So moving away from just, I know we don't even have just giving. I don't think West Ham Park currently has a charity bank account. As Marguerite says, that the bulk of finance sits with the city, but for some applications, you do need to have a charity bank account. Thinking about physical signage, thinking about online presence, how we report income, processes, policies. So lots to do. And also I really hope to actually raise some money, so in year. So at the moment, we've identified one of the landfill community funds, which the park's eligible for, up to 75k for improvement projects. So I'll be very much looking at the business plan, looking at what is currently funded there or where we could release resource to be spent on other things. And I have added it in my paper, but it's worth noting that that kind of fundraising is really competitive. So what we want to do is kind of identify lots of those sorts of funds that we can apply for, as I say, write that case for support so that we can do that really efficiently, hopefully get quite a few bids out in the next 12 months. So I'll pause there, but welcome any questions or comments.
Lovely, and I think we'll support the ambition of being able to, even if it's a trickle a year, have something towards particularly sort of campaign project based, that we can sort of build a critical mass around and use it up. I think that's very worthy ambition.
Catherine? It's very important for the when you're fundraising, thinking about fundraising, the events that you really coordinate closely with the friends, because you don't want to daily the bulk.
Absolutely.
Yeah, can I just ask a question on the sort of strategy for fundraising? Because I'm not entirely sure. It seems to be sort of all things still people at the moment because we're still in exploration mode. And I would think, particularly given the structure of West Ham Park, it lends itself really well to a corporate partner because of accessibility, because of volunteering, because of our social impact, because of natural environment impact, etc., etc. There is a real business case for almost having a single sponsor for it, which would deliver benefits for you and your team because the resources are required to manage a single partner as opposed to trying to get 50 different people to give a small amount of money. When will we sort of get to a stage of thinking about the approach on that in particular?
Yeah. For me, it's about understanding the budget first. So what's the gap in fundraising we're looking to fund over the next 3 to 5 years? Once we know that amount, I think we can then understand whether there's a corporate that can afford it, quite frankly. Yeah. I agree in lots of ways. I completely agree with corporates, and they're fantastic partners. They do take a lot of
work, especially in the first year or so. They tend to get easier, which is great. So we are looking for multi-year partnerships. But yeah, it might be that with corporate budgets as well, if you might want one, maybe 2, 3, 4 is more realistic.
And is there a reporting element that will help you get there? I mean, for example, we talked earlier in Bill's really helpful update about the work that was done as a sort of social pantry, food sharing opportunity, but that isn't really drawn out in an evidence base in a social impact report, for example, or something similar. So we need to do that groundwork to enable you to.
Yeah, we do, and actually STORP's changed as well. So you do need to start. There's more charities need to report more on impact. It's something I'm really passionate about. What I'm doing at the moment is mapping what's already being measured, which actually is happening. So looking at what are the learning team, the friends of the team on the ground, what are we measuring already? Yeah. I think from those measures, we can probably actually do a lot with that. And then there's probably a couple of extra surveys, questions that we might want to add in that really then give people a sense of where their money, what impact their money's had. That answers your question.
Yeah, I know we've had this conversation actually. I think the conversations and the the transformation partnership did was really interesting, and obviously being part of some of those conversations in the Square Mile, a number of firms that have under the spend or utilised CSR, what does the community look like in the Square Mile? There is a direct link we can make here between the corporation, the wider open spaces as a bridge. But equally, I think that point of actually then being able to go and actually use some of these as examples where you actually go in and pitch to them, right? I think that's the whole thing. I also don't want us to be in a position where, you know, we spend so much time getting to the point where we think we can evidence what has happened, as opposed to going, there's a real opportunity, there's a campaign, there's a project. And actually, in one sense, and I don't mean this sort of flippantly, have a punt, have a go, get in there and say, this is who we are. This is, you know, the opportunity. Because I think, yeah, it would depend on who the name is. I totally take the point, having done that and working for one, there is work involved. And I think for a lot of them, there is a desire that their own employees have some in space time to be able to evidence the living connection, all that. So that has to be properly managed. But I think in one sense, we prefer than to loads of tiny small ones that, yeah, but I think from our side as members, fully support that and very keen to do whatever we can, particularly here, building that bridge, even if it's trying it out. Yeah. Just to see the initial responses on the basis of the work that the transformation partnership did. Wendy.
Yes, thank you, Chair. As far as sponsors, I think since we seem to be providing sports facilities for Canary Wharf workers, there's quite a few big firms down there that will put their hands in the pocket. There's also West Ham, and there's the Jack Ritchie Foundation. Yeah.
Thank you, Chairman, and I just want to provide a little bit of context as well, where I think perhaps the phrase is used often, but we're going on a journey with fundraising here. You know, taking some big steps, and there's a very big pivot that's happening through the charity review, and bringing in Susanna has been a most welcome addition to our team to, I think, meet that mandate, but also those opportunities that exist. I do want to just note, though, Susanna's remit, in addition to fundraising, incorporates commercial activities, volunteering, events, communication, strategic partnerships. So we're not even yet at 1 FTE for fundraising now. The plan is to grow the team. That will be part of this infrastructure building that we've alluded to. But again, just to contextualize and give people a sense of what this journey is going to look like. It is going to be a multi-year effort to put the things in place that we need to do to shape what can be done as quickly as efficiently as possible while growing that team and that overall capacity for fundraising. I'm confident we'll get there and get absolutely the right person in the place to lead it. But standing still, we are take a few years to really lean into this space with the full thread.
Yeah, I think on that point, all I would say is I think that we just need to ensure that we're tightening that ring as reporting progresses over the period, just to be very realistic. I think just to fill in the point of Bill, you know, we have this conversation with the finance committee. I think there's some maybe colleagues who believe that you just flip the switch, you go from where we were to grant funding. There it is, you've got the opportunity, there's someone there, there should be loads of pots you can tie into. And I think as members, our responsibility is to represent and to clarify and contextualize. But I think within this room, what's then really key is that we've got that, to use a horrible phrase, runway, but understanding of what is then achievable and possible sort of within each year.
Preston, you'd like to say investment, instead of West Ham Football Club.
Yes, we all knew the role, thanks to the Lady Mayor's recent interventions. Excellent. Yeah.
They need to stay up to get some
Easy.
Moving swiftly on to item 11. Neither myself or town clerk are aware of any questions that he sent in advance. I don't see any hands shooting up. I have no other urgent business under item 12. And I'm seeing nothing else being raised at this point. That brings us to item 13, which is the exclusion of the public for us to move to the non-public agenda. Members, are we happy to exclude the public at this point? Thank you, town clerk.
Please vote on the stop live stream and